This is On the Table 101, hosted as part of the Chicago Community Trust and Knight Foundation's On the Table National Learning Network. Our goal today is to provide you with a brief history of On the Table, then review some of the basics needed to plan this civic engagement initiative. So providing a forum for discussion and collaboration has been part of the Chicago Community Trust since their founders were thinking about how to solve the city's social ills and brought together civic leaders over a series of mealtime conversations just to talk about how they could make their city better. They decided to pool their philanthropic resources to maximize their charitable impact, and in 1915, the Trust, Chicago's Community Foundation, was born. Then in the late 1990s and early 2000s, they again used this model and hosted a series of Chicago dinners, small, informal, mealtime conversations that brought together area residents from different races and ethnicities to talk in a very personal and often really challenging way about race relations. Fast forward to 2014, on the eve of their 99th anniversary, the Trust continued this tradition and organized the first ever On the Table to engage residents and discuss ways to strengthen their community. More than 11,500 people participated in that inaugural year, and the Trust has been holding On the Table conversations every year since. In 2016, they added a new component, the Acting Up Awards. Small financial awards that move ideas discussed during On the Table conversations into action. The initiative continued to grow and gain recognition in Chicago. And then in 2017, Knight Foundation decided to invest in the initiative, introducing a cohort of 10 cities who replicated On the Table, adding 3 new cities to the cohort for 2018 and 2019. The Trust has also supported a number of other communities across North America in big cities and small towns who have implemented the initiative over the past 5 years. In all, we estimate that more than 30 communities have adopted the platform and have collectively engaged more than 250,000 people from coast to coast. To support the continued growth of this movement, the Trust and Knight Foundation have created the On the Table National Learning Network at onthetablenetwork.com. It's a virtual learning community for foundations, civic institutions, and nonprofit leaders who have implemented or shown interest in replicating the On the Table model. At its core, On the Table is really simple. It's a day of civic reflection and dialogue. But why On the Table? Why communities choose to participate really runs the gamut. Every community has their own goals, and they can and will and should be different. In Chicago, it was an opportunity to elevate community voice. In Silicon Valley, they've focused on the housing crisis facing their region, identifying key concerns and bringing together partners to help come up with solutions. A few communities have partnered with their city or county government to use On the Table as part of the public participation process to help inform, strategic planning processes in their community. The possibilities really are endless. Once you've identified your why, the next step should be to set goals for your initiative. Setting goals should be aligned to kind of what you hope your outcomes are. Measuring participation may make sense if you're trying to raise awareness. Measuring engagement if you're trying to foster relationships. Gathering ideas, opinions, and insights if you're trying to learn about what the community wants or you're trying to identify new solutions. As you think about setting your own goals, we just wanted to share some of the guiding principles that the Trust has used since the very beginning. First, maximum flexibility. Now, the Trust made a firm decision not to force focus On the Table on a single topic. They insisted on this open model, conversations that had no agendas. Anyone could take part and talk about whatever was on their mind. There were no barriers to participation. Hosts and participants made the conversation their own by discussing challenges and issues that felt most urgent and relevant to them. Inclusive and intimate. On the Table encourages small group conversations, 10 to 12 people around a table, even if you're part of a bigger event, just so everyone has a chance to speak and be heard. Conversations bring together a diverse cross-section of participants in private homes, backyards, at local restaurants, schools, community centers, places of worship, libraries, offices, retail establishments, and more. Now, while we don't force or prescribe the guest list, a lot of communities really encourage hosts to try to bring together people who may not otherwise know each other. But one thing's for sure, food is fundamental. Brown bag potlucks, catered soup and salad, or cookies and tea. The menu doesn't matter as much as the idea of breaking bread together as you talk. We really believe this changes the dynamic from a meeting to a gathering. Solutions-oriented. To ensure that conversations don't just turn into a gripe session, we ask for people's ideas, a focus on solutions, not just the problems. On the Table gave voice to any resident who had an idea for improving our region. Affirm and inspire. On the Table should be a forum that allows participants to connect on a deeper level and to recognize their shared values for their community so that they walk away feeling affirmed and inspired to take action to make their community stronger. On the Table has proved that even in today's virtual world, people still crave human interaction and see the power of working with others to make positive change in their communities. Many communities have implemented surveys for On the Table participants to find out how their discussions may impact their civic engagement moving forward. And in Chicago, survey results have shown that nearly 90% of respondents said that they were very likely or somewhat likely to take action on an issue that they discussed during their conversation. Finally, staying connected. The Trust wanted to use On the Table to create new opportunities for community members to build and maintain connections, not only with the foundation, but with each other as well. This idea of connecting back to the foundation and sharing what was discussed is really essential to the On the Table model. Now, while you may not be able to implement every idea that someone shares, in Chicago, the Trust has always been committed to elevating community voice and sharing what they learned back to the community. We also know that tables have stayed connected to each other. In Chicago, survey results have shown that 43% of respondents stayed in contact with one or more attendees that they didn't know before the conversation. And 24% worked with people around their table to address a new idea, issue, or project. Now, with those principles as background to guide your thinking about and understanding of On the Table, let's move on to the basics of how to plan the initiative in your community. Once you identify your goals and answer the question of why On the Table, planning can begin. When will your conversations take place? We often get asked whether or not conversations have to be held on a single day. Now, foundations have been flexible with organizations in terms of when they host in the past, but for the most part, really do focus publicly on a single day of conversation. Just because scale matters, it's powerful to know that you're one of thousands coming together on a single day, and it truly becomes a civic holiday in your community. While there are a lot of bells and whistles that can be incorporated if time and resources allow, the true power and impact of On the Table comes from convening organizations' commitment to providing a forum for dialogue and discourse that can spark positive change in communities. We've seen organizations implement the initiative on a modest budget that relies primarily on direct outreach and word of mouth to build participation and awareness. Now, on the other side, some have made a more robust investment in promotional materials and advertising that ups the cost a little bit. One thing's for sure, we can't stress enough that you really do need to identify someone within your organization to own the project and manage the team, even if you're also engaging with consultants. Now, before you start outreach, it's important to create a core set of tools that introduce the Civic Engagement Initiative to your community. A fact sheet and host guide are a really good place to start. Templates are available for both on the National Learning Network, which we'll get into a little bit later. You'll also need an online presence or a website to serve as an information resource and registration portal, which we'll touch on in a bit as well. But first, let's talk about hosts. Hosts play a really critical role in making sure that On the Table is a meaningful and positive experience for the participants. Now, rather than trying to recruit thousands of community members en masse to participate in On the Table, we find that a hub and spoke approach that focuses on recruiting hosts that represent diverse sectors of the community is really the most effective way to both build awareness and participation in On the Table. Starting with your existing network is great, but it's also so important to reach beyond the usual suspects and make an effort to reach those whose voices may not always be heard. Now, doing this, you're not going to be able to rely on email blasts alone. It's not going to get the job done when it comes to outreach. A mix of emails, in-person meetings, presentations, phone calls, host webinars, social media, leveraging the communications channels of partners. A good, healthy mix is needed to truly reach within communities. The network has a lot of template materials and scripts that can help you with this. Now, just a note regarding media and media targets. At the Trust, they were always really intentional to look beyond just getting coverage and instead engage media as partners in this effort. Media outlets were contacted far in advance and asked to host conversations and have really jumped on board and done so in a variety of ways. Live conversations on air, inviting readers or viewers or listeners into the newsroom. The list goes on and on. As an added bonus, we found that when outlets host their own conversations, they're likely to cover those conversations as well. Here we lay out some of the key roles for On the Table hosts. Bottom line is that hosts must own their conversations, from choosing their location to thinking about how they want to handle food, who they want to invite. It's both impossible and inadvisable to do it any other way. As an organization seeking to bring onto the table to your community, the best place for you to start is to recruit hosts that are going to help you reach broadly and deeply into and across your community. Then give them the tools they need to convene and facilitate their conversations. Then trust the table to do the rest. So we'd highly recommend some form of registration system to track who and how many people in your community participate in On the Table. It not only helps you connect and provide information with hosts on the front end to support their planning, but also gives you a way to follow up and report back after the conversations. We're often asked, what information should we collect and from who? Now, most of the organizations implementing On the Table in their communities have focused on host registration, as opposed to trying to gather guest information at the front end. In Chicago, when we asked for all of the guest information up front, we found it actually discouraged hosts from registering their conversations into the system at all. They didn't know who they wanted to invite at that point, or were just, kind of hesitant to share guest information with us at all. We've actually moved to collect just the basic details from hosts upon registration, and I know a lot of communities who do that and then ask their hosts to collect contact information from their guests at the actual conversation to share with the foundation for follow-up. Here we outline a few additional outreach strategies to consider. Both the host and many of the night cohort cities have actually used a superhost strategy to drive participation as well. A superhost is usually a larger organizational partner who agrees to host 5 or more tables of 10 to 12 participants each. So the superhost can do that at a number of smaller events throughout the day or at one bigger event with multiple tables. Some communities have also worked with partners such as young professionals organizations, libraries, the Chamber of Commerce, who have agreed to host what we call public tables and make those available to anyone in the community looking to attend an On the Table conversation. Finally, others have offered meal stipends or reimbursements to encourage nonprofits who might otherwise be unable to participate. So this strategy has been effective in helping ensure that conversations are offered in underserved communities with limited financial resources. Now, communities usually provide hosts with guides, either printed or electronic, to help them plan and facilitate their On the Table conversations. Some create special guides for youth, family, or students. We've seen these guides translated into various languages, just specific to the communities that you serve. In addition, a number of organizations have created various collateral and promotional items to promote and brand On the Table. Everything from tote bags to notebooks to participation stickers. Now, This obviously comes with a cost and is definitely not required to hold successful conversations, but we do have a lot of templates and inspiration for collateral available on the network. Spoke a little bit about media earlier, but in addition to engaging media as partners and having them host conversations, here are some tips for coverage as well. We recommend looking for opportunities, to make news at launch and then finding different ways to engage media in the days leading up to, as well as the day of on the table conversations. At launch, we've seen communities host big news conferences where they demo on the table conversations, engaging city leaders in the process to participate. Others have pitched local morning TV shows to announce the initiative. Some have introduced on the table at a major donor or community event. We have media materials and templates available in the resource section of the network to help you with media relations. Storytelling helps when trying to convey the impact of On the Table to media as well, showcasing interesting hosts, unique conversations or venues where conversations are going to be taking place, as well as calling out stories of impact that have come from On the Table conversations in the past. When considering digital strategies to support your conversations, a good place to start is just assess your needs. Where do you think information about On the Table will live? Your campaign web presence could be a standalone microsite. It could also just live within a section of your organization's website in general. Do you want to create new social media channels and build up the audience there? Or do you want to leverage your organization's social media channels? Obviously, either approach has pros and cons, but we've seen more organizations than not leverage their existing social networks and even use On the Table as a way to attract new audiences to their work. So the end goal with these digital communications is to drive both awareness of and participation in your On the Table conversations. So there are a lot of ways you can do this, using personal stories to explain why someone has decided to host a conversation or why a guest is excited to participate, using infographics or images to show how easy it is to register, providing tips from your toolkit on how to lead a productive conversation, producing short informational videos to introduce On the Table to your community, hosting Facebook Live conversations to answer questions from potential hosts. Some have also worked and used an ambassador strategy, identifying influencers within their community who have a large social media following and, engaging them, telling them about On the Table and asking if they would be willing to share information about the initiative with their networks. So people like, local business, school, nonprofit, faith leaders, or local celebrities like TV or radio hosts. So it can be as easy as providing them with template language and graphics that they can just post easily on their channels. Now, advertising can help too. Facebook and Instagram have made major changes to their algorithms over the past year or two that have made it more difficult for content from organizational pages to be seen. So putting some money aside for advertising can ensure that your followers and intended audience actually see your posts about On the Table. You can target the advertising based on zip codes, demographics, areas of interest. Even boosting a post for $20 can go a long way. Now, the Trust and Knight Foundation Cities have worked with academic and professional public opinion research partners to conduct surveys of On the Table participants in order to learn more about their experience, overall, topics discussed during their conversations, perceptions of issues and opportunities facing their community, and actions they might be interested in taking afterwards. Examples of these survey questions are available for download on the network. Now, we've also seen organizers either replace or supplement that survey with a qualitative option that asks hosts or participants to take and share notes from their conversations, sending it back as a photo to the foundation via text or sending it via email, dropping them off in the office. Now, whether you gather insights using a survey or feedback from the conversations directly, organizers generally do commit to reporting back to the community in some way. And there's no one way you can do this. Written or digital reports can be shared. Others have had one-on-one or small group meetings with local opinion leaders or nonprofits to figure out how the findings might influence their work moving forward. Others have hosted bigger community meetings, bringing together a wide range of stakeholders to talk about collaborative next steps. A combination of these might be right for your organization or foundation as well. But here again, both financial and human resources should be considered in deciding the right approach for you. Now, the good news is there are so many amazing tools and templates available to help make this really, really easy. It's all on the National Learning Network's website. The Trust and Knight Foundation are extremely proud to partner to share this tool with anyone interested in replicating On the Table in their community. There are a lot of resources available on the public site, specifically the toolkit, which walks you through 6 easy steps to implement On the Table and links you to specific materials. And if you choose to join the network, you'll have access to the member portal, where you can find a wide range of open source templates, inspiration from other communities, and a forum where you can connect with others who have or are planning to host conversations in their communities. So we have a lot of documents available, templates, inspiration. We've put them into buckets just so they're easy to find: how to, outreach, and impact. The open source materials are something that we're really excited and happy to share with anyone looking to replicate the initiative. There are logos, host guides, collateral, and more. But please note that On the Table is a registered trademark of the Chicago Community Trust. And while we invite anyone to use the brand, we do ask that you would agree to the terms of use outlined on the network before you do so. The forum is really great also. It gives you the opportunity to share news from your community, brainstorm new ideas, and respond to others' questions. It's a really great place to connect and collaborate. And if you decide to move forward in planning On the Table conversations in your community, you should also be sure to add it to our calendar, which you can do by scheduling an event in the member portal. That way others can learn about how you've made this powerful civic engagement initiative your own. So we have seen the power that On the Table conversations have had across the country, sparking collaborations and generating powerful new ideas to strengthen communities. We're really excited that you're interested in joining the movement, and there's much more information to be found on the National Learning Network website, onthetablenetwork.com. You can always email us questions at info@onthetablenetwork.com as well. I encourage you to visit the site and join the network so you can access a full range of resources that we're making available and connect with others who are planning or have implemented this exciting civic engagement initiative. Thanks.